RiseOhm, RiseOhm. Rise means to raise or to elevate, and ohm is a measure of resistance. So, in my estimation, or from my vision, RiseOhm means to elevate the level of resistance. And I also happen to be a farmer, so I'm particularly interested in rhizome culture, the submicrobial culture that affects the soil and consequently the nutrient value of the soil and the potential for vegetables or plants to uptake the nutrient. So the mycorrhizae or the rhizome microbial culture is what contributes to very healthy soil. So rhizome, as I was saying, the way that I put it together, rise meaning to elevate, and ohm meaning a level of resistance. So elevating the level of resistance. Also, rhizome meaning subsurface, beneath the surface, underground, if you were. So there's a lot of potential interpretations of that word. Some call it a double entendre. I think it's probably a quadruple entendre. And then metaphysics is purely beyond physics. What people sometimes refer to as the spiritual realm, the way. You know, I think it's basically a way or a culture. So, RiseOhm Metaphysics is basically the underground culture, potentially that revolutionary culture, and potentially that culture that elevates the resistance and raises us to another level of being as a society. So, like I say, this is the first launch of this show. What I hope to be able to do is to communicate about different things. I like to say it's about the culture, the subculture, and the agriculture, because I myself am a regenerative farmer or organic farmer. I grow foods not using synthetic fertilizers or pesticides or anything like that. Those are the things that are part of my practice. And my motto is love the people, feed the people. So there's things that I do and with intention of providing food for the community. I have a long history in dealing with food justice, food sovereignty, food security. I like to consider myself an advocate in the area of bringing healthy food to the people. I have over 25 years actively in natural and organic retail. I have a lot of experience around that. Those are a lot of the things that I want to cover in this show. I also want to talk about things that affect people, what they call socially disadvantaged people, in the areas of agriculture, land ownership, and also food access. And I also really just like to cover the culture, man, hip-hop culture, what's going on in society. I'm hopeful that I'll be able to bring in guests, bring in people who can check out what we're doing, and also interview some people about some things that they're doing that might be parallel or kind of in the same synergy of what I'm trying to do. So I look forward to that. I look forward to talking to other people, bringing other people in, whether it's musicians or artists or people in the local community, people in the diaspora that we want to connect with, things that we want to talk about, things that are relevant to contemporary society. So this is what we're about. This is RiseOhm Metaphysics. My name is Shahi Mustafa, and I am the owner of Taylor Hood Farms. But I'm also a teacher, community advocate. Sometimes people call me community organizer, but I don't necessarily go by that title. I grew up in Chicago, Illinois. I ended up moving to Washington, D.C. in 1990, went to Howard University, got really familiar with that community and that city, fell in love with it, and right now I live in Las Cruces, New Mexico, and I was recruited here to work in the Natural Foods Co-op back in 2006. And I did that for about 9 years, and then I started farming. And the more I learned about farming and its connection to food access, I just really got into it, and I tried to do as many demonstrations as I can. I do aquaponics. I grow food using aquaculture, which is fish culture, basically. That's one way to be able to grow food without the dependence on soil necessarily, and also the heavy dependence on water. I believe water conservation is critical for us right now. At this moment, as we speak, we've been in pretty much a drought, I feel like, for about a year and a half, maybe 2 years. Looking at about 14 days so far of triple-digit temperatures, and it really has an impact on how you grow food, what you can grow, your potential to be able to produce. So, it's really an interesting time to live in the desert and be a food producer. One of the things that happened recently, and a lot of people have asked me about it or talked to me about it, is recently President Joe Biden passed an act to, in some ways, repair some of the damage that had been done to historical black farmers over the years by the USDA, the United States Department of Agriculture. And the way that I understand it, what has been happening for decades is that black farmers were not afforded the same privileges as other farmers when it came to access to loans or resources in order to grow their operations. Subsequently, a lot of black farmers went into debt. They took on loans that were predatory in nature, so they were not able to pay back their loans. Their farms were foreclosed on. They lost their farms, or they never could make a profit because they always owed so much money to these debtors. So what it appears to be is that Joe Biden, through his most recent presidential act, forgave some of those loans and used money in order to, as part of his Recovery Act, use some of the money in that act, a portion of it, not all of it, to basically cover those loans. So I was always a little confused about how that worked, because basically what they're doing is taking the money and covering loans that were predatory in nature, that were set up by the USDA / the government in the first place. So the way that it was reported was that there was this great benefit coming to black and other socially disadvantaged farmers through this act, and a lot of people interpreted that as some sort of stipend or pay going to these farmers, when in reality all it was doing was sort of recovering or trying to reduce some of the damage that those predatory loans had so many ways brought an effect on the people who received them. So it wasn't really that the people got money. It was just like they got some debt relief, some loan relief, and that brings them, in my estimation, back at about zero, so they can start over again. Which I think in and of itself is kind of a slap in the face. It's like, well, yeah, so if you're saying, okay, well, you don't have to pay these loans back, I wonder if they also assessed like the amounts that people had paid already into these loans, and if that was also credited back to the people with the interest that it would have accrued. And none of that has anything to do with really opening up any more opportunities for black farmers. Now, I think there is some language in this act that calls for further assessing, helping with some outreach and some education and some marketing to try to help these disadvantaged farmers get some advantage and be able to compete fairly in the open market. And I think that those kinds of things are helpful, but it's not really what's called for, because what we've seen in the last century or less is really a depletion of the number of black farmers. We went from a number which I think peaked at some time to 12 million black farmers to, I think right now we're looking at less than 100,000 black farmers nationally. So if you look at those numbers, that's one thing, because farming is an occupation, but also we're talking about land ownership and access to land and what that really means to people. What land ownership means in terms of creating generational wealth. One of the things that I've really come to understand the more I've learned about farming is the value of land ownership as it relates to water rights, specifically, and especially in these times where the people who have access to water often have a great opportunity, I should say, financially, to create revenue streams, either as farmers who are using that water for agriculture, or as people who don't use the water but are able to lease or sell their water rights to people who want to do development, whether it's housing or industrial. So those revenue streams continue to compound for generations, because that need is always there, and as long as there is a regulated connection to how much water one can have access to, well, then that always presents itself as a financial commodity to the people who have those rights. So these things are the things that we look at, and we try to figure out how we can make it right. What can we do to fix some of these problems? And it really is telling to me that at this time, a couple days ago in Florida, a federal judge put a halt to the act that President Biden passed and said it was unconstitutional because it singled out beneficiaries by race. And the people who are upset about this are white farmers who are not included in this act as beneficiaries. That's really interesting, because this act, only a portion of this act went to support socially disadvantaged farmers. The large majority of the money of this act actually went to support existing farm operations. So people who had already been benefiting from USDA loans and opportunities and benefits. So it really didn't take away from any of the group that was already benefiting. It only really tried to fix some of the past issues that had happened to the people who had been disadvantaged. So the idea that there would be someone from the larger group that already was benefiting for decades, that would be upset that any money went to offset some of the damage that had been done to socially disadvantaged farmers, I think is really indicative of the kind of culture of systemic racism and privilege that we have to continue to fight. The idea that somebody would see what happened to disadvantaged farmers, especially black farmers, over the years, and seeing a debt relief program basically as a disadvantage to them because they also have debt. I think it just speaks to the expectation of the dominant society that everything truly does belong to them, and they should be able to take advantage of the opportunities that systemic racism produces. I feel like that's a problem. I feel like that's part of the problem. I feel like that's something that we need to address, and I don't see it going anywhere. Um, I'm always struggling with how we deal with that. I think talking about it is one thing, but I feel like as a people, we need to really, as black people especially, we really need to be thinking about sovereignty. We need to be thinking about what we can do on our own to take care of ourselves. Um, what I learned largely in the natural and organic food sector was that there was a huge gap between the customer base that was being served, what I consider healthy food, and the socially disadvantaged, or I think sort of the overlooked population, and by that I mean black and brown people. We generally grow up in communities that don't have access to the healthiest of food, and it's not by coincidence. A lot of it is based on market studies that kind of, in my opinion, quantify and validate some of the systemic racism around food and health and nutrition, quite frankly. Um, our people travel to stores, we eat food as much as anybody else. When we want healthy food, we'll jump on a subway or a bus or drive or walk or whatever it is that we need to do to get it. We don't have any less interest of it than anyone else, but we don't have access as much as other people do. And so we see grocery stores closing our communities all the time, never to be replaced. And we travel to, the different communities in ours to go get healthy food, and we see the difference even in the stores that were in our communities. We see the difference in the level of service and in the quality of the product that they put on the shelf. We can see that, and that's obvious. And I feel like one of the things that I was always fighting for in that sector was more diversity, and trying to ask people, how can we reach out? How can we go into these communities and help them to get these stores or these shops established where they can have access to this healthy food? And there was a lot of lip service. A lot of people said that it was a good idea and they wanted to see it happen, but ultimately one one person spoke to me candidly and said, frankly, that's not our responsibility. That's you. That's your community's responsibility. And I was taken aback at first, but then I thought about it and I said, yeah, I agree. That is something that we need to do that. We need to go back to the days of self-reliance and do for self. And one of the things that I like to do is really reestablish more community-based food outlets, whether it's through community gardens or whether it's through small co-ops in our community or whether it's just supporting some of the existing um, small mom and pop stores in our community and really encouraging them to bring in more healthy food. And the way you do that is by spending your money there. I mean, you go and tell them what you want. You ask for it and you pay for it, and that's generally what drives it. We live in a capitalistic society, and money goes a long way in terms of influencing the people who are in your community and the people who want to make money off of your community. But I'm also a huge advocate of growing. I think we need to start growing our own food. I think we need to have an eye on what goes into the soil, what goes into the food. I think we need to take some more control over that as well. That's one of the things that I like to try to do is go out and teach people what I've learned in terms of food production, regenerative agriculture, and also subsequently the impact on the environment that we live in. The things that go into the the soil go into the groundwater, and we ingest that. Those things affect us as well. So when we are raised and surrounded by chemicals and synthetics, and we are literally fed those things, it shouldn't be any surprise that we suffer disproportionately from incidents of cancer and high blood pressure, diabetes. Those kinds of things can definitely be exacerbated by what we put into our bodies. So I'm gonna cut this short today, and hopefully you enjoyed so far what you've seen. I am going to do a weekly show where I'll continue to address certain things, and like I say, I want to make sure that I bring in guests so they can share information. I also want to talk a lot about the culture and what's going on in contemporary society, and perhaps introduce you to some people that you might not otherwise get to experience. So peace out. Thanks for checking out RiseOhm Metaphysics. My name is Shahi Mustafa. Peace.